Welcome back to another class of Python for app development. In my previous class, I've shown you how you can create up a toggle button. And in this class, we are going to increment it in such a way so that we can customize it and we can disable and enable the toggle button so that we can disable and also enable the counter button to function properly. I'm going to show you each and every steps from this, like the first step to the last one. So make sure not to skip any part because there are going to be a couple of important steps which you need to follow up. And without any further ado, let's move on to our IDE by opening up PyCharm on our device. So basically now you can see I have opened up the KV file. And as we're going to be making it a bit functional, so we're going to be working on our main py file instead of the KV. But I'm also going to be customizing and modifying a bit of the KV file. But first off, let's go off to the main py file. And the first thing, what you can see over here is that we are incrementing our counts over here and taking the base with the widget. Okay, so here what we have to do is also we're going to increment it in such a way so that it is self-incremented, and we are going to be customizing it step by step. So you can see on the button click, we can see the prints, we have seen the self, and we are also seeing the self count, which is plus by 1. So it is 8 right now, so we're going to be turning it into 1, but we are going to be customizing it a bit more on the widget example. Okay, so right after this count, I'm going to be using another function, which is count enable. And why am I going to be using count enable? Because you can see when we have the if function as the Boolean value as normal, it is showing us as up. But when it is not normal, or let's say it is down, it is showing us as on. So this is what we are going to be using the count enabled function over here. So here I'm going to put in count underscore enabled. And now when we have it enabled, I'm going to put in an equal, and we're going to use, let's say, a Boolean value, let's say false. Okay, so when it is enabled, we are using it as false. And now we want to use the self-enabled argument or function on the on button. So I'm going to put in self dot count enabled right over here. Now, as we have the self count enabled, I want it to be equal to the Boolean value true. So I'm going to put in true. Now, whenever you type in true or false, Python is just going to analyze it and it's going to term it as, a 0 or is it a 1 value. But when we have it off, we are also going to need another self count enabled function applied. So I'm going to cut this off. I'm going to put in self dot, we're going to put it enabled. Count enabled. There we go, count enabled, and I'm going to turn it false as the Boolean value, which is going to show us 0 in a numerical value. Okay, but as it's not going to be showing us a numerical value of 1 and 0, we're going to be using our if function inside of our button clicks. So here on our button clicks, and right after button is clicked, this line, we're going to be creating an if function. So here, if my self count enabled, which we are using as the argument, so I'm going to put in self, then I'm going to put in dot count enabled. So if I use the self count enabled, I'm going to do is going to be using a colon over here, and I'm going to increment the self counts over here. Okay, so let's say I'm going to self count them, and now you can play it out anytime you want. And let's just play this over here. And you can see it might show me an error at first, but it's going to just, load up all of the things which we see over here. And you can see it is turned on and off. So this is turned on. And if I just click on this now, it will not work. So now you can see that it has been intertwined with this button, just like I said in my previous class. So if it is turned on, only this will work. If it is turned off, it will not work. Because now it is using the self count argument and also the function, which is using the Boolean value false. Okay, so when it is basically on false, it will be turned off, and it's not going to enable the next structure or the next widget, which is turned on value, and it's not going to count anymore. So let's play it again, and you can see when it is turned off, the buttons will not work. But it will show Python that a button is being clicked. Okay, so it's going to analyze it, but it's going to take the argument or take the function of this toggle button. So if I turn this toggle button on, and now if I click on it, it will now work. Okay, it doesn't matter which number we use as the self count. So if I put in, let's say 2, and if I play it out, it's going to work as 2. So this is turned off, it won't work. But if I turn it on, and it will show me 2, 4, 8, 6, and also it's just going to keep on going. Okay, so if I just put in maybe like a 100 over here, and if I play it out, it's going to be turning it out as 100. But you can see it is showing me multiples of 8. So we're going to also change it in the KV file, which is already showing me multiples of 8. So instead of that, I'm going to put in multiples of the specific value. There we go. I'm going to cut this off over here. Multiples of the specific value. If I play it out, you can see multiples of specific value, but it won't work. But if I just turn this on, it will show me it's the multiple of 100. Okay. Now, as we have created ourselves the enable and disabled button, the next thing what we have to do is that we are going to be customizing our modifications of this button, and we're going to enable and also disable it. So let's move on with our class. And now I'm going to show you how you can disable this button. When you have this off, it's not going to work, okay? And it's going to be disabled. You will not be able to click on this button. But when you have this turned on, this button will enable itself and you will be able to click on it, okay? So I'm going to start off with my KV file, and you have to go off to the button over here, KV file over here. And there we go. We have this button section. Okay, you're just going to find out where the root on button click is and make another space over here so that you can intertwine it. And now you're going to disable or use the disabled function. So I'm going to put in disabled, and I'm going to put in the Boolean value disabled over here. I'm going to put in false as the variable. Okay, now we're not done yet because now it's just showing me that there is just disabled. Okay, so if I just put in false, you will basically see this will be disabled. Okay, but you can see most of the time it does not work. So you can turn it off and on and it will still work. So I'm going to find out the value where we have it disabled, and we're going to intertwine it in such a way so that we can totally disable it whenever we are working on it. So if I just put in true over here, and if I play it out, you'll basically see now this button has been disabled. So we're going to be using a Boolean value and a NOT gate inside of it. Now, if you guys still don't know what a NOT gate is, if you have any idea about gates or logic gates, then I would suggest you go check out a couple of videos, or I will let you know a bit about what the gates are. So there are a couple of gates in a logical function, but the most basic of them are the AND gate, NOT gate, and the NOR gate. So in this class, while we are creating ourselves a disabled button, we have to use the NOT gate in such a way so that it is turning true into false and false into true. Now, you might think that this is very confusing for people who are totally new to it, but I'm going to show you step by step on how you'll be able to create up the value and how you can create up, let's say, a Boolean property in this class, and also how you can create up the disabled button. So first off, go off to the main py file, and you're going to create a Boolean value inside our Boolean property or as a class inside of the widget example. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to go up, and there we have our widget example as the class. And right after count over here, I'm going to create another line over here, and I'm going to put in count, and you're going to put in an underscore, and I'm going to put in enabled over here. And I'm going to put in equal. I'm going to put in Boolean property. Okay. So we have our Boolean property. Now we have to term it if the value is false or true, because now we are working with Boolean properties only. And right after GP, I'm going to create up my from kivi dot properties over here, and I'm going to import it as my string, but also I'm going to turn out my Boolean property. So I'm going to put in string property, put in a comma, and then I'm going to put in Boolean property over here. So as we have our, let's say, custom property over here, so I'm going to take out this value count enabled, Control C, And what I'm going to do is go off to my KV file and I'm going to turn this into the count enabled function. So what I'm going to do is going to be routing this up so that both of them are intertwined with both files. So the KV is going to be intertwined with the main py file, and it's going to use this specific property or the Boolean property of this specific file. Okay, so now let's try playing out the whole thing. And you can see this is turned off and on, but still this is working. So if it is off, it will work. But we want to disable this function or disable this button over here, and we want it to be turned as disabled depending on the toggle button. So if we want to like fix out these values over here, you're going to play out the whole thing and you can still see this is not working. So first thing, I'm going to change out a couple of values. Let's say I'm going to put in 1 over here, and I'm going to put in 1 over here. Make sure that the string property is the same one as the key properties of string property on the bottom line. And the last thing which you have to do is that you have to remove out this line, because if you are working with two values, it won't work. Then go off to the KV file, make sure that the root count enable is turned on. Okay. Now, if you play out the thing, you will basically see now this is turned off, right? But if I turn it on, you will basically see this will be disabled. Okay. So you can see this button does not work anymore, but we want it to be the opposite. Okay. So we also have to function it up in such a way so that we use the NOT gate. Okay. Now, this is where the NOT gate comes to help. So what you basically have to do is put the NOT gate in between and play out the whole thing. So now if I turn it on, it will be on. And if I turn it off, it won't work anymore. So you can see how simple it is to create a disabled button, or how you can disable any toggle button or any button and intertwine them together so that it functions properly and also shows you the outcome or the result just the way you want it to be. Now, if you want to customize it the way you want to, let's say I'm going to play this, and you can see this is turned off, and when I turn it on, this button turns on. So here, what I want to do is that I want to say this one should be saying, let's say, nothing. Okay. So I'm going to put in not nothing, but I want it to say click here. Okay. So if I want to change that, I have to find out the button name. Okay. So here I'm going to put in this value, click on this button, this, or let's say I'm going to do is just going to type in button over here. And on the main py file, I want this button, with the button is clicked or turned off and on, I want it to say, when this is turned off, I want to say nothing. Let's say the text should be like this. I'm going to put in click to turn on. Turn on. Okay. Now, if I play it out, you'll basically say, like, see that this is saying off again. But you can see you're going to click to turn on when it is off. Okay. So this is basically how you'll be able to fix out or create a toggle button or intertwine them together. And another thing to keep in mind is that whenever you are using this disabled function over here, you have to keep in mind that you'll be able to use it in all of the buttons or all of the widgets which has interactions within them. Okay. So thank you for watching this video up till the very end, and hope you understood about everything in this class. Make sure to follow up the steps which I've shown you. Now let me just highlight up the parts where I have customized this. You can see this is all I did over here, and I rooted it up. Make sure to use root, not self, because you don't want Python to do it or do this interaction itself. Okay. So whenever you're trying to intertwine them together and manually interact between them, make sure to use the root dot function, not the self function. And the one or the customizations which I've done over here are these ones. And you can see we did if widget normal and all of those. And both of these together, we're going to, or let's say both of these together are just going to create you that type of interactive type of an app, and also how you can intertwine buttons between or inside your apps. So without any further ado, let's move on to our next class of app development with Python.